Okay, for the second part, we're going to need to add her eyes. Now, even if this was going to be a talking headshot, you don't just want the eyes, if you can help it, you just don't want the eyes to just stare and not react at all. They want to try and include the eyes in the acting, at least a bit. Ideally, you want to use the entire body. You want to use the head, you want to use the shoulders, you want to use all of it. But even if you're only using the face, at least use the eyes. Now, there's something in animation for dialogue called accenting the dialogue, and that doesn't mean giving the audio an accent. It doesn't mean having your character speak with an accent, although your character can obviously have one. Accenting dialogue means that you are picking words that are important in the dialogue and having some way to have the character show some kind of action, show some kind of movement during the important part. So maybe widening of the eyes, gesturing with their hand, moving their head up and down or side to side, blinks, changing where their eyes are looking. All those things can be ways to accent the dialogue. So that's something we're going to do with the eyes here. So I'm going to have the eyes, the brows, and the pupils as separate. So do eyes, brows, pupils. Okay. Okay, so we have
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind.
So there's a nice little hesitance with the pause between the and wind. So at the, she can kind of avert her gaze a little bit, like looking off to the side, like she's thinking. So let's try. Expanding this. Not the mouth. The brows. The. Her eyes are pretty wide as it is, wide open, so maybe. The. Okay. So she's starting off with her pupils looking ahead. Maybe at this point, she can look the wind. She may be looking too far off, too far away. We'll see. The wind. The wind We can maybe at doesn't. She can close her eyes. She may not need to close her eyes, but we'll see what it looks like with them closed. Briefly. She might want to keep her eyes open the whole time. We'll see. Let's actually use that one for the end. And have her open her eyes a little, if it looks okay, even wider. Her eyes are already kind of wide when they're at their widest here, but maybe a little eye accent by widening her eyes here a little more. Doesn't bleed a bum. Doesn't. F5. Okay. Let's see. Might want to get rid of the closed eyes. Let's get rid of the storyboard.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed.
No, let's keep the eyes open.
The wind doesn't.
Let's have her start saying it. Shifting her eyes right when she starts talking.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
And let's have her eyes open wide before they get more narrow. Swap these. And let's have her eyes wide and bleed. And usually where you accent the dialogue can vary. Sometimes it can be the very beginning of the word, but also sometimes if you're really trying to hit a word hard, it might sometimes be a good idea to accent the dialogue at the popped vowel, like the most important popped vowel. So at the end where she says bleed, if I want to emphasize that, I could do the accent on the beginning of the B sound, or I could do it at the E, so bleed, E, if that's the emphasized part of the word.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
Okay, so her eyes are very choppy. She's not, it definitely is in-betweens, but first stage figuring out if the eye shapes work where they are before I start in-betweening them.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't.
I think I like the idea of her delaying this more squinted eye to doesn't.
Wind.
So maybe right here. Let's try it.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed.
Maybe sooner.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
Okay, let's try the pupils. So they move from there to there. They could shrink, but I think they shrank a little too much here. Now, pupils can move pretty fast, so you may not want a slow shift of the pupils unless that's the idea. Instead, maybe adding maybe a smear. So a smear is a distortion. So instead of just moving the eye, we're just making a perfect circle or perfect shape of the pupil right there, maybe smearing it. Let's see if that looks any good. That might be better on a single frame rather than it being on a 2 exposure. Okay. No, she's not moving her eyes enough for that to look good. Let's in between the eye shape first. Another in between. Let's try that. That's too slow. Let's favor the green. Maybe a frame before. Let's try to stretch the eyes. Five. add in between here. We'll see if the eye shapes look okay with in betweens.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
So here, favor the green.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
And let's try easing it into that last pose. Okay. Let's see what the eyes look like.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
Okay, so we could try the brow. Actually, let's try the pupils. Okay. I'm going to move the eyes up below the pupils so we can see them back to back. Okay, here they can start shifting. So I tried the smear, but she's not moving her eyes far enough in a short enough amount of time, so the smear doesn't really look good. So instead, if she's just shifting her gaze and you're not doing a smear, then it would be good to have it, or we're going to see how it looks, but generally you'd want the eye to follow the upper eyelid. We wouldn't want to do a direct in between. If the pupil isn't going to touch the eyelid, it'd be better to roll it along usually the top eyelid. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want her to look like she's rolling her eyes. I just want her to, it's an in between, but it's sticking to the top of her eyelid. Panic 5. Okay, So her eyes can widen and then her pupils look forward. She looks a little crazy there. Or she can start looking back, which I'm thinking she might start looking back early. Infinite 5. I just make sure she looks like she's focused. Where are her pupils in the beginning? There they are. I'm going to copy and paste those. There we go. She looks focused there. And let's see if her pupils stay in that same position. Oh, they bleed past the eye. So here. Okay. 5.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
She's got eye wonk going on this side. This side looks a little weird.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed. The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed.
Let's move it so that instead of instead of accenting doesn't, let's see what happens if she accents wind.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
I think that might look better.
The wind doesn't bleed.
The word wind sounds like it might be more emphasized in the dialogue. Okay. Then we have the brows. Infinite 5. Okay. And let's have her brows start moving before her eyes do. That might be too much, but let's see. Okay. Infinite 5.
Her eyes doesn't bleed.
And it's a F and F4. Maybe relax her expression a little bit. Just a little bit. Not actually being relaxed, just more than it was. Okay. Fine. And let's ease into that and see if that looks okay.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
Okay. I don't think the end of the expression, the eyebrow change at the end, is benefiting this at all, so let's remove those. Okay.
The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir. The wind doesn't bleed, sir.
Okay. And there we go, we have a draft of the eyes. In the next section, we'll start, there is the hair. Before we do the hair, we can see what kind of movement, what little movement we can get with the head by putting it on a peg and moving that around a little bit, because that's going to make a difference with the hair. And we may still need to add some more in-betweens for the mouth shapes. We'll see what it looks like when we have head action.